Welcome back to Dark Case Diaries, the channel where every story matters, every voice is heard, and every truth is brought to light. Here, we dive deep into real-life cases that touch the heart, challenge the mind, and inspire change. From untold tragedies to remarkable acts of courage, our stories are more than just events. They're journeys of justice, resilience, and hope. If you believe in the power of truth and the courage it takes to speak out, you've found your place. Subscribe, join our community, and let's uncover the stories the world can't afford to forget. He died in the back of a squad car. The sirens. The night was humid, heavy with the kind of silence that only small towns know after dark. Streetlights hummed faintly, their glow fractured by moths circling endlessly. Most windows were shut, curtains drawn, houses asleep. But down on Sycamore Avenue, silence shattered. Red and blue lights tore through the calm, splashing across walls, asphalt, and the blank eyes of storefront windows. Sirens wailed, piercing the midnight air. In the back of a police cruiser sat a man whose name the world would one day chant. But on this night, he was just another black man in handcuffs. Sweat rolled down his temple. His chest rose and fell too quickly, as if each breath was a battle. He pressed his forehead against the cold plexiglass barrier, staring at the dark outline of trees passing by. His lips moved, whispering a prayer no one in the car cared to hear. "Please, Lord, don't let me die tonight." The officer in the driver's seat didn't look back. His partner, scrolling through his phone, smirked at a private joke. Neither noticed the shallow gasps, the wheezing sound that was growing louder by the second. To them, he wasn't a man with a mother who prayed for him every night. He wasn't the big brother who taught his little sister to ride a bike. He wasn't the church usher who shook hands at the door every Sunday morning. To them, he was a statistic, a suspect, a body in the back seat of a squad car, and in less than an hour, that body would be lifeless. The tragedy hadn't happened yet, but the clock was already ticking. Before the sirens, long before the flashing lights painted him as a criminal, he was simply David Elijah Turner. David was born on a rainy Tuesday in 1986 in a small hospital with paint peeling from its walls and nurses who worked double shifts just to keep the doors open. His mother, Angela, held him tight against her chest, whispering promises of a better life than the one she had known. "God gave you to me for a reason," she said, exhausted but radiant. "And I'll never stop fighting for you." David grew up on Maple Street, in a neighborhood where laughter and hardship walked hand in hand. The summer smelled of barbecue smoke. Cracked sidewalks became chalk canvases for kids, and everyone knew each other's names. But winters were cruel, and bills piled up faster than Angela's 2 jobs could cover them. Still, David was different. Even as a child, he carried a light inside him. He was the boy who helped Mrs. Jenkins carry groceries up her porch steps. The boy who comforted his younger sister Marissa when bullies mocked her for her hand-me-down clothes. By 12, David discovered his gift, music. His uncle had left behind an old acoustic guitar with 2 broken strings, and David plucked at it until melodies filled the cramped living room. Music became his refuge, the one place he felt completely free. At church, his voice lifted him higher than the stained glass windows, bringing grown men to tears. The pastor often said, "This boy's got an anointing," and David believed it, too. He believed God had made him for something greater. But belief didn't pay rent. By 16, David was bagging groceries after school to help his mother. By 18, he was working construction jobs in the blistering heat, hands blistered and back aching. His dream of becoming a musician dimmed under the weight of survival. Yet even then, he carried his quiet faith like a lantern through the darkness. "Don't worry, Ma," he would say, wrapping an arm around Angela when she cried late at night over bills. "One day, I'll make it better for us. You'll see." Angela would smile through her tears. "Baby, you already make it better. Just by being you." He wasn't perfect. No one is. He had arguments, made mistakes, fell into the wrong crowd for a season. But he always pulled himself back, always returned to his music, his family, his faith. David Turner was a man of flesh and flaws, yes, but also of heart, resilience, and love. And that's what made what happened to him so devastating. Because when David died in the back of that squad car, the world lost far more than it realized. The world lost a son, a brother, a neighbor, a friend, a light, the man he became. By 25, David Elijah Turner had become the kind of man people leaned on, even when his own shoulders carried more weight than most could bear. He lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment not far from the same Maple Street neighborhood where he grew up. The carpet was worn, the paint chipped, but the place always smelled of warmth. Coffee in the morning, cornbread and collard greens on Sunday evenings, and sometimes a faint trace of guitar strings being strummed long after midnight. David worked as a warehouse operator, stacking pallets, hauling heavy loads, clocking in before dawn and clocking out when the sun was already sinking. It wasn't glamorous, but paid enough to keep the lights on and to slip $20 bills into his mama's hand every week when she pretended not to notice. His co-workers called him Big D, not because of his size, though he was broad-shouldered and stood 6 feet tall, but because of his heart. When tempers flared on the job, David was a peacemaker. When a new hire struggled, he stayed late to show them the ropes. He carried burdens that weren't his to carry, but that was just who he was. Outside of work, his world revolved around 2 things: his family and his music. Every Friday evening, he picked up his sister Marissa's kids after school, giving her a break. He became Uncle Dave at soccer games, the loudest voice in the stands, cheering until his throat ached. On Sundays, he was back in the church pews, guitar in hand, leading worship with a voice that had only grown richer with time. And then there was Danielle. She had met David at a church revival one summer. She was quiet, book smart, with a smile that reminded him of sunlight breaking through clouds. For a while, life felt like it was finally giving back to him after years of struggle. They talked about marriage, about saving up for a small house, about raising a family of their own. But David's dream of becoming a professional musician never fully left him. Some nights, after Danielle had gone home and the city was asleep, he'd sit on the edge of his bed, guitar in his lap, and play. He'd write lyrics on crumpled notebooks, lyrics about faith, love, and the weight of being a black man in America. One night, Marissa overheard him singing a line that sent chills down her spine. "If I die before I wake, Lord, let my life still speak." It was just a lyric to him. To her, it felt like prophecy. Because as much as David tried to stay hopeful, the world had a way of reminding him of his skin color. He'd been stopped before, sometimes for matching a description, other times for rolling too slow through a stop sign. Each time his heart pounded. Each time he wondered if this was the night he wouldn't make it home. Still, he never let bitterness take root. "Anger burns fast," he once told Danielle, "but love lasts." Those words would echo long after his last breath. Roots and responsibilities. In his neighborhood, David was more than just another face. He was that neighbor, the one who shoveled the elderly couple's walkway in winter, who fixed Mrs. Thompson's leaky faucet without asking for payment, who played basketball with kids too young to have fathers around. Children adored him. Adults respected him. Elders trusted him. Even in hardship, he carried himself with quiet dignity, as though he had decided long ago that the weight of the world would not crush him. It would only shape him. Angela, his mother, often said, David was born old. She meant he carried wisdom beyond his years. While others his age were chasing quick thrills, David was saving, giving, and teaching. On Saturday mornings, he sat with his nephews on the front porch, teaching them chords on his guitar. His niece, only 7, loved to braid his hair while he played, giggling every time he hit. She had met David at a church revival one summer. She was quiet, book smart, with a smile that reminded him of sunlight breaking through clouds. For a while, life felt like it was finally giving back to him after years of struggle. They talked about marriage, about saving up for a small house, about raising a family of their own. But David's dream of becoming a professional musician never fully left him. Some nights, after Danielle had gone home and the city was asleep, he'd sit on the edge of his bed, guitar in his lap, and play. He'd write lyrics on crumpled notebooks, lyrics about faith, love, and the weight of being a black man in America. One night, Marissa overheard him singing a line that sent chills down her spine. "If I die before I wake, Lord, let my life still speak." It was just a lyric to him. To her, It felt like a prophecy. Because as much as David tried to stay hopeful, the world had a way of reminding him of his skin color. He'd been stopped before, sometimes for matching a description, other times for rolling too slow through a stop sign. Each time his heart pounded. Each time he wondered if this was the night he wouldn't make it home. Still, he never let bitterness take root. Anger burns fast, he once told Danielle. But love lasts. Those words would echo long after his last breath. Roots and responsibilities. In his neighborhood, David was more than just another face. He was that neighbor, the one who showed the elderly couple's walkway in winter, who fixed Mrs. Thompson's leaky faucet without asking for payment, who played basketball with kids too young to have fathers around. Children adored him. Adults respected him. Elders trusted him. Even in hardship, he carried himself with quiet dignity, as though he had decided long ago that the way of the world would not crush him, it would only shape him. Angela, his mother, often said, David was born old. She meant he carried wisdom beyond his years. While others his age were chasing quick thrills, David was saving, giving, and teaching. On Saturday mornings, he sat with his nephews on the front porch, teaching them chords on his guitar. His niece, only 7, loved to braid his hair while he played, giggling every time he hit the wrong note. Those were the moments that grounded him. The ordinary joys, the fleeting laughter. At work, David became known as a man who brought extra lunches in case a coworker forgot theirs. At church, he led youth Bible studies, listening more than he spoke, guiding kids who saw in the role model they were missing at home. But there were cracks in the surface. Bills stacked higher than his paycheck. Overtime shifts took him away from Danielle more often than either of them wanted. And some nights, after everyone else was asleep, he sat alone on his balcony, staring out at the city, wondering when life would ease its grip on him. He wanted more, not greedily, but earnestly. A small home for his future family, a chance to record his songs, a life free from the constant fear that his skin made him a target. Yet even when doubt clawed at him, he pressed on. One step at a time, he would say, God didn't bring me this far to leave me here. It was this resolve that made him so loved. And it was his very humanity that made his final moments so haunting. Because when the night came, when the sirens wailed, when the lights flashed, it wasn't just David in that squad car. It was every person he had ever loved, every life he had ever touched, every dream he had ever carried. And all of it was at risk of being silenced. Love, promises, and tomorrow. Danielle always said David had old soul eyes, the kind that carried storms and sunshine all at once. She loved him for that, for the way he could walk into a room and somehow make it feel lighter. They met in the summer heat, when the church revival tent was bursting with songs and hallelujahs. Danielle had come reluctantly at first, invited by a friend. But when she heard David sing, her reluctance melted. His voice wasn't just music, it was testimony. Soon, they were inseparable. Their dates weren't fancy. Neither had the money for that. Sometimes it was dollar menu burgers eaten on a park bench. Other times, long walks under the city lights, hand in hand, speaking dreams out loud as if daring the world to listen. Danielle wanted to be a teacher. David wanted to record his own gospel album. Together, they painted a picture of the future, a little house with a porch swing, kids chasing each other in the yard, music filling the kitchen as dinner simmered on the stove. One evening, while strumming his guitar, David looked up at her with a half smile. You ever think about what forever feels like? Danielle tilted her head. All the time. Well, David said, his voice soft but steady. Forever feels like this. With you. They weren't married yet, but they spoke of it often. David had even begun setting aside small savings for a ring, though Danielle insisted she didn't need diamonds. Just you, she would say. That's all I want. Just you. It wasn't a perfect relationship. They argued, disagreed, stumbled through the struggles of adulthood. But there was love, real and stubborn, the kind that held on through storms. Danielle often worried when David was late coming home, especially after being stopped by police more than once. Just promise me you'll always come back, she whispered one night. clutching his shirt as if holding him in place. David kissed her forehead. "I promise. I'll always come back." But promises, as life often proves, are fragile things. Because within days of that vow, Danielle would be standing on the side of the street lit by police floodlights, screaming his name, begging for answers as officers kept her at a distance. And the man who had promised forever would not come back. The night it began. It was a Wednesday night. The kind of night that felt like a bridge between exhaustion and hope. Midweek. Payday just around the corner. David had just left Danielle's apartment. They'd eaten takeout, laughed about a silly TV show, and talked about how they'd spend the weekend. Danielle had kissed him twice at the door, lingering as though some quiet part of her didn't want him to leave. "Text me when you get home," she said, her hand still holding on to his. "You already know I will." David replied with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. The city was quiet as he drove. His old Honda rattled with every pothole, but the radio worked, and that was enough. A gospel song played low, the lyrics wrapping around him like armor. The streets were mostly empty. Just a few cars parked along the curbs, the glow of neon from a late-night diner, and the occasional flash of a bus speeding past. David tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, humming. He was tired, yes, but content. Tomorrow meant another long shift at the warehouse, but it also meant one day closer to his weekend with Danielle. Then, headlights flared behind him. He glanced in the rear-view mirror. A police cruiser. Close. Too close. David's heart sank. His foot eased off the gas. His mind racing to the checklist every black man in America knows too well. Stay calm. Keep your hands visible. No sudden movements. Speak respectfully. Survive the stop. The cruiser's lights ignited. Red, blue, relentless. David pulled the side of the road, the sound of gravel crunching beneath his tires. His palms were already damp against the steering wheel. The officers stepped out. Two of them. Their flashlights sliced through the night like accusations. David whispered prayer under his breath. "Lord, let me make it home." One officer approached the driver's side window, his voice sharp, already commanding. "License and registration." David nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. It's in my wallet. My wallet's in my back pocket. I'm going to reach for it slowly, all right?" The officer's hand hovered near his holster. "Just do it." David moved carefully, deliberately. His wallet came out, trembling in his hand. He passed it over. The other officer circled the car, like a predator studying prey. "Where you headed this late?" "Home," David answered, steady but soft. The flashlight beam hit him in the eyes. "From where?" "My girlfriend's." A pause. A smirk. "You got anything in this car we need to know about? Drugs? Weapons?" "No, sir. Nothing like that." But suspicion hung heavy in the air, thicker than the night itself. David gripped the steering wheel again, waiting, praying. And in that moment, he didn't know it, but he had already stepped onto the road that would not lead him home. Escalation. The night was still, but inside David's chest, a storm raged. His heartbeat thudded, so loud it seemed to echo in his ears. He kept his eyes fixed on the officer holding his license, praying silently that this would end as nothing more than a ticket. But the officer's expression shifted, brows furrowed, lips curled into suspicion. He tapped the edge of the license against his palm, glancing at his partner. "Step out of the vehicle," the officer ordered. David swallowed hard. "Sir, may I ask why?" "Step out. Now." His voice was sharper, colder, leaving no room for discussion. David raised his hand slowly, fingers spread wide, as though the very air might accuse him. He opened the door with deliberate caution, every movement exaggerated to prove he had nothing to hide. The gravel crunched under his shoes as he stepped into the glow of headlights. The night air was cool, yet sweat slicked his brow. "Turn around." "Hands on the hood," the officer commanded. David obeyed, the cold metal biting into his palms. He felt the pat-down begin, rough, impersonal, searching for evidence of guilt that didn't exist. The second officer circled, peering into the car. "Looks messy in here," he muttered. "You hiding something?" David shook his head. "No, sir. Just on my way home." But his voice quivered, betraying the fear he tried to mask. The first officer pressed harder against his back. "You nervous, huh? What you nervous about?" David closed his eyes, trying to steady his breath. I just want to get home safe." That sentence, simple as it was, seemed to hang in the night air like an unspoken challenge. The officers exchanged a look. One smirked. "Safe?" the officer echoed. "That's up to you." David felt the sting of humiliation burn in his chest. He hadn't done anything wrong, yet here he was, treated as guilty, treated as less than human. The search yielded nothing. No weapons, no drugs, nothing but the quiet dignity of a man who knew too well what it meant to live under suspicion. Yet still they weren't done. "All right," the officer said finally, "we're going to have you sit in the back of the car while we run some checks." David turned confused. "Why?" "I haven't." "Don't argue. Just move." And with that, the invisible line between inconvenience and injustice was crossed. David took one last look at his car, his freedom, his chance at making a home. Then he was guided, no, pushed toward the back seat of the squad car. The door shut behind him with a heavy thud. And in that sound was a prophecy, the cage of glass and steel. The squad car door slammed shut, and the sound reverberated through David's chest like a final verdict. The back seat smelled of sweat, rubber, and old fear, ghosts of those who had sat here before him. The plexiglass barrier loomed in front of him, a wall between freedom and authority, between hope and despair. David shifted uncomfortably. His wrists itched from the metal cuffs, his breathing shallow. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against the cool glass, willing himself to stay calm. "Just a check," he told himself. "They'll see I've done nothing wrong. They'll let me go." But a small voice deep inside whispered something darker. How many times have you heard this story before? Through the windshield, he could see the officers standing outside, talking, laughing, even. Their silhouettes moved casually beneath the rotating glow of red and blue lights, as if his life wasn't hanging in the balance behind them. David tried to steady his breath. He closed his eyes, whispering a prayer so soft it was nearly lost in the hum of the engine. "Lord, please, let me make it home." Minutes passed, then more. The longer he sat, the tighter his chest felt. He tried to adjust, to find air, but the cuffs restricted him, his arms pinned awkwardly behind his back. He shifted again. The panic rose higher. "Officer," he called out, voice strained. "Excuse me, sir, could you loosen these cuffs? They're too tight. I can't breathe right." One of the officers glanced back at him, then away, uninterested. "Officer, please." David's voice cracked now, urgent. "I have asthma. My chest is tight. Please, I need my inhaler. It's in the car. Please, just sit back and relax." The officer interrupted coldly. "You'll be fine." But David wasn't fine. His breaths were shallow, ragged, each one scraping like sandpaper through his lungs. He tried again, louder this time. "I can't breathe back here. Please, I need help. I need help now." Still no movement, no urgency. The officers turned back to their conversation, their laughter carried by the night air. Inside the cage of glass and steel, David Turner was fighting for his life, and no one was listening. Breathless, the squad car felt smaller by the second, its walls pressing in like a coffin made of glass and steel. David's chest heaved, his breath shallow and uneven, the wheeze of air struggling through constricted lungs. He tried shifting his body, angling for space, but the cuffs cut into his wrists, locking him in a position that stole more air with every passing minute. His legs trembled. Sweat slicked his forehead. "Please," he gasped louder this time. His voice cracked with desperation. "I can't breathe." The driver's door creaked open, one officer sliding into the seat with an annoyed sigh. He didn't even turn around. "You'll be all right," the officer muttered, almost dismissively. "Stop exaggerating." David shook his head violently, his chest jerking. "No, I'm serious. I need my inhaler. It's in the glove box, please." The officer's partner slid into the passenger seat, shaking his head with a smirk. "Every guy we put back there says the same thing. Can't breathe." He chuckled. "Seen it 100 times. David's eyes widened. He slammed his shoulder against the plexiglass barrier in a desperate attempt to make them look at him, really see him. His voice rose, raw with panic. "I'm not lying. I'm dying back here. Please." The officers exchanged a glance, but neither moved. The driver started the engine. The vibrations rattled through David's body, amplifying the suffocating cage around him. His breath turned into ragged gasps now, each one a battle. Tears pricked his eyes, not just from the physical fight for oxygen, but from the crushing realization that no one cared, that his words, his humanity, his life, meant nothing to men sitting just feet away. In the darkness of the car, he whispered the only name he knew would listen. "Jesus, help me." But the sirens flared to life again, drowning out his prayer. A voice fading. The sirens howled. But inside the squad car, David's own breath was the loudest sound in his world, ragged, desperate, breaking apart like waves crashing against rocks. He tried to sit upright, forcing his lungs to expand, but the cuffs pinned his shoulders at an unnatural angle. Each attempt at breath felt smaller than the last. His mind flickered with faces. His mother, Angela, her hands clasped in prayer, whispering his name to God. His sister, Marissa, laughing on the porch, her children climbing into his lap. Danielle, her eyes glowing in the soft light of their last evening together. He thought of the promise he had made her, "I'll always come back." A promise he was failing to keep. "Help," he whispered, voice barely audible now. He tried again, louder, though the strength in him was slipping away. "Help me, please." The officer in the driver's seat glanced at the rearview mirror, his jaw tightening. For a second, just a second, David thought he saw recognition, maybe even concern. But then the officer looked away, focusing on the road ahead. The partner beside him scoffed. "He's fine. They all say that. Just wants attention." But David didn't want attention. He wanted air. He wanted life. His vision blurred, colors smearing into streaks of red and blue. The hum of the cruiser mixed with the pounding in his head, the world closing like a tunnel shrinking to darkness. Still, even as his body betrayed him, his lips moved, quiet, resolute, a final prayer crawling from his chest. "Lord, let my life still speak." And with that, his voice faltered, fading into the night. Witness in the dark, 2 blocks away. The world was quiet. Most windows were dark, most porches empty. But on the corner of Sycamore and Grant, a man named Clarence Miller was locking up his small convenience store for the night. Clarence was 61, with tired knees and a heart softened by years of watching his community struggle. He knew the rhythm of his neighborhood, the sounds, the silences. And that night, something about the flashing lights parked just down the street unsettled him. He paused, keys jangling in his hand, eyes narrowing. Police stops weren't new to him. He had seen too many, had watched neighbors humiliated over broken taillights or jaywalking tickets. But something about the way those lights lingered felt wrong. Clarence stepped onto the sidewalk, squinting against the harsh red and blue glow. From where he stood, he could make out the vague outline of a man in the back seat of the cruiser. His head was tilted forward, movement sluggish, like someone drowning without water. Clarence's stomach tightened. He had seen that kind of panic before, the gasping, the way the body fought itself when breath refused calm. "Hey!" he called out, waving his arm. "Everything all right there?" One of the officers glanced his way, his expression unreadable in the glare of headlights. "Move along, sir. Mind your business." But Clarence didn't move. His heart thudded in his chest. He could see the man's lips moving in the back seat, words forming but smothered by the closed window. He could see the frantic rise and fall of his chest, the desperation in his blurred silhouette. "That man ain't okay," Clarence shouted, his voice breaking with urgency. "He can't breathe. You need to help him." The officers turned back toward the car, but only for a second, long enough to glance at David, who now slumped against the plexiglass, eyes half-lidded. Then one officer shook his head, dismissive. "He's fine. Just another act. Get home, old man." Clarence's fists clenched. Every part of him screamed to do something, to run closer, to rip open the door himself. But fear rooted him in place. Fear of what would happen if he crossed that line. fear of becoming the next body in the back of that car. So he did the only thing he could. He pulled out his phone and hit record. The shaky glow of his camera caught the squad car, the officers, the man inside. And though Clarence didn't know it yet, that decision would make sure David Turner's voice was never silenced completely. Silence in the back seat. The cruiser rolled forward slowly, its tires crunching against the pavement, the night swallowing the sound. From the sidewalk, Clarence kept his phone steady, the recording capturing every second of flashing light, every moment of disregard. Inside the car, David's body leaned heavily against the plexiglass barrier, his breaths shallow, uneven, until they weren't breaths at all. At first, the officers didn't notice. The driver scrolled through his dashboard computer, typing in information, while his partner muttered something about wasting time. But then, silence. The usual sound of a detainee shifting, breathing, protesting, faded into stillness. The officer in the passenger seat turned his head lazily, almost out of boredom, glancing back into the cage behind them. For the first time that night, his smirk faltered. "Hey," he muttered, "he's not moving." The driver frowned, glancing into the mirror. "What do you mean not moving?" "I mean not moving," the partner repeated, his voice sharpening. "Hey, you, sit up." No response. The officer twisted in his seat, his voice rising. "Hey, can you hear me?" He banged on the plexiglass. David didn't stir. His head remained slumped, chin pressed against his chest, his body frighteningly still. The driver pulled the car to a hard stop, his pulse suddenly thudding. He yanked open the door, rushing to the back. Clarence zoomed in with his phone camera, his own heart racing. The officer yanked the door open, his voice louder now, threaded with panic. "Hey, sir, wake up." Still nothing. He shook David's shoulder roughly, but the body only swayed lifelessly against the seat. "Damn it," the officer shouted. "He's out. He's not breathing." The partner was already fumbling for the radio. "Dispatch, we need EMS now. Male suspect, unresponsive. Possible respiratory failure. Hurry." Clarence's hands trembled as he recorded. He could hear his own voice on the video, whispering in disbelief. "Lord, they let him die back there. They just let him die." The flashing lights continued their merciless spin, painting the night in red and blue, while inside the squad car, the life of David Elijah Turner slipped further from reach. Too late to save. The night air turned frantic. What had moments before been dismissal, and laughter was now panic laced with desperation. The officer pulled David's limp body from the back seat, laying him on the cold pavement beneath the blinding wash of red and blue. His head lolled to the side, eyes half open, lips tinted blue. Come on, breathe," the officer shouted, his voice cracking. He dropped to his knees and began chest compressions, the sound of palms slamming against ribs echoing through the night. Clarence held his phone higher, recording every second, his voice shaking as he muttered, "They let him get to this. Lord have mercy, they let him get to this." The partner fumbled, his hands shaking as he tore open a first aid kit. "Where's the mask?" "Where the hell is the mask?" he barked, his voice trembling with fear. "Forget the mask, just keep compressions," the other officer yelled. Sweat streaked his face as he counted under his breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. David's chest rose and fell under the forced rhythm, but no air filled his lungs. No spark returned to his eyes. The partner dropped beside him, finally pressing his mouth to David's, forcing air in. "Breathe! Damn it!" he gasped between breaths. "Don't do this." But the truth was written all over the pavement. Too many minutes had passed. Too many pleas ignored. Too much humanity stripped away before urgency ever came. Stay tuned for part 2. This is Dark Case Diaries. Like, share, and subscribe.